The Fujifilm X100 is this incredible, one-of-a-kind imaging tool that also happens to be one of the most frustrating releases in recent Fujifilm history. And that might sound a little harsh right off the bat, but I thought it was important to underscore something in this video, and that is we can hold more than one opinion on a product at the same time. To allude to this camera being completely flawless would be laughable, and to say that it has a ton of deal breakers, well, that would be disingenuous. The Fujifilm X100 it strikes this fascinating blend where it has no true rivals, but similar to a trust fund baby straight out of college, it fails to innovate in the 4 years removed from its previous self. I spent the better part of 6 months using this camera all over the world. And in this review, I want to talk about all the things that I've enjoyed, all the things that need to get better, and ultimately who this camera really is for. Before I jump into the specifics of this camera, I gotta mention the Church Street Foto Club. It's this community that I'm building online where I share a brand new story every week. It's free to join and you'll learn about all my photography adventures from around the world. If you love photography, you're gonna love this community. At its core, the X100 is a fantastic imaging tool. You know, it has a 40 megapixel APS-C sensor, this backside illuminated X-Trend sensor that gives you plenty of dynamic range and resolution to spare. This isn't exactly surprising because it's the same sensor that we find in the X-T5 and the X-H2. What's unique here is the experience of using this sensor. Unlike any other solution on the market, you have this camera that can be used with one hand and also delivers this experience of composing an image in 4 unique ways. You can use the optical viewfinder to land your shot where you see a little bit outside of your frame. You can use the electronic viewfinder if you really want to see what your photo is going to look like. You can use a combination of both where you can have an optical viewfinder and a little EVF in the bottom corner to kind of see what your image is going to look like. And then you can use the back LCD as well to compose a shot. And really, there's 5 ways because you can also compose a shot without even looking at the camera. This complete experience, it's unique to the X100 and the X100 series of cameras. There's nobody else offering this on the market. On the topic of composing a shot without even looking at the camera, the autofocus. The autofocus on this camera has significantly improved from the predecessor. Fuji has been working a lot over the last 2 years when they introduced the new X-Trans 5 processor, really bringing in some artificial intelligence and some smart tracking. Overall, the speed and accuracy of autofocus has improved on this camera. You can use the wide tracking or single point where you grab focus, recompose, and then take your shot. Or you might even trust the subject tracking where you might pick a human, an animal, or a vehicle and allow the smarts of the camera to lock focus and grab your photo. Whichever method you choose, it has been improved from the previous version. Is it perfect? No. I mean, there were instances where the autofocus would struggle, whether it was low light or low contrast situations, but it doesn't feel like it's handicapped in any significant way. This is something that still operates very quickly, very accurately, and especially if you know how to tweak the settings for your type of photography, it's gonna perform incredibly well. And I guess that's probably the important thing to take away with not just this camera, but many modern solutions, is that there are great out-of-box experiences for autofocus from a lot of camera manufacturers. You know, Sony seems to perform really well in this area, but for the most part, you're gonna have to jump into these settings and tweak it for what you're capturing to get the best performance. And while that might be deflating to novices and armchair experts, the reality is that if you allocate just a little bit of time to 2 or 3 settings, you'll have a camera that focuses quickly and accurately. If you're asking me, the X100 doesn't produce a better looking image than the X100V. If I really have to split hairs, there were some instances where the noise performance seemed to be better at higher ISOs, but this could be negligible. You know, when I'm looking at a photo from the X100V to the X100 it doesn't look like it's considerably better. What has improved is your ability to capture an image and edit an image because of image stabilization, the brand new processor, and the fact that you have way more resolution to work with. And some of you might be wondering, how does this X100 compare to my M cameras? Does this compete with the M cameras? Well, the short answer is no. Right? I mean, when you're looking at the premium optics that you would get on a Leica M camera, the full frame sensor, you're just gonna have more latitude to create a story in more environments. And just better ingredients in your raw file overall. However, the X100 gets close in a lot of environments. And because of how light this camera is, how quick it is, how nimble it can be, and things like that integrated flash and the built-in ND filter, it gets you close in a lot of situations. And because of that lower price, that lower entry point to get up and running with this thing, well, that might be more than enough for a lot of people, where you can create a compelling image very easily and get you pretty damn close to a premium solution. Which leads me to my next point, and that is why this camera is so backordered. And the easy answer is to point to the TikTok virality of this thing and this thing just being influencer famous. That is part of the answer, but the reality is the camera delivers an experience that's really unique because of how easy it is to use, because of how good the file is compared to premium solutions and how close it gets to them, and because of all the things that are included in the experience of using this camera. It garners a lot of interest. It delivers on the promise, and more often than not, it exceeds expectations. And that is why, when you compound all those things, the camera is just so damn hard to find. The reason the X100 has become this viral sensation is because it creates great stills while being great to use. And look, there's been no shortage of hot takes about how this camera is overrated, and I can't seem to just agree with that, at least not at face value. Because the reality is that this camera, the complete package, you're not gonna find it anywhere else. The Fujifilm X100 is fun. You have this blend of technology and rich features and unique differentiators like film simulations that make the camera really fun to use. And because of that, you see a camera that continues to see incredibly high demand. Now, this review wouldn't have been possible without the sponsor of this video, Quark Expeditions. They specialize in polar adventures. They orchestrate these trips to the Arctic and Antarctic throughout the calendar year. Now, I thought they were in the business of these luxury, posh trips, and it is far from that. They are in the business of delivering bucket list adventures. Every expedition is led by this really talented, robust team of experts that are looking to deliver an experience unlike any other before. You're going to be on the ship with glaciologists, ornithologists, and adventurers and expedition leaders that have years, if not decades, of experience. I thought I wasn't a cold weather and landscape person, but my trip with them shattered that belief. I had the adventure of a lifetime, created some of my best work, and truly learned new things about myself. If you're looking for the voyage of a lifetime, a new kind of challenge that you want to add to your bucket list, visit Quark Expeditions today and speak to an expert. From Mexico City to Toronto to Helsinki to New York to the frickin' Arctic, this camera delivered in all sorts of environments. It never failed on me in any of these conditions. Now, you'll want to get that filter adapter and some sort of filter to complete the weather resistance on this camera, but once you do, you can confidently use it all over the world. When I stuck to photography, I didn't have this camera overheat on me or shut down due to freezing or just change its behavior in any way, regardless of where I was in the world. So if you're using this thing, you can use it very confidently and know that it can be a great companion for the photography you're about to do. Something that continues to elevate the shooting experience here are the physical dials. Like the world's greatest fidget toy, you can control your aperture, your shutter speed, your ISO, exposure compensation right on the camera. You don't have to go into a menu or have a customizable dial to do these things. Now, there are customizable dials and buttons you can use to really tweak the experience. But what I love about this, and what I credit to Fujifilm early on to deepen my understanding of photography, is you have your exposure triangle ready and available at all times. So when you get a camera like this, and you're not a photographer, you're a hobbyist or an enthusiast, or you're just getting started, there is a setup here where you can deepen your understanding of photography right off the bat. But let's just say you already know how you shoot and you already want something that's a little bit more automatic. Well, you can relegate all of these things to a couple of dials and let the camera do the work. And for those of you wondering, I was using this camera with a new parachuter strap from Wattencraft. They sent this over to me. They even had my initials engraved on this thing. It's a really cool strap, really unique. And if you're looking for something that isn't your typical leather wrist strap, you should take a look at this thing. There's also a few more quality of life improvements on the X100 VI. You have the sensor cleaning, the digital teleconverters, a lower base ISO, and quite a bit more video options. You know, none of these are really a standout feature by themselves, but when taken as a collective, it just fleshes out all the things that you can do with this camera in the field. It's kind of like a menu at your favorite Chinese Hakka restaurant. Look, it's a lot, and going through them can be a lot, but say you had a late night bender, you know, you might find something new that your soul is craving. So when you look at the X100 VI, yeah, there's a ton of things to get through, but there might be these different creative opportunities that come up where a feature might lend itself incredibly well to, or from a maintenance perspective, just taking care of your camera better. I also have to mention the video functionality on this camera because it did get a noticeable jump. Being able to record 6.2K video up to 30p in 10-bit 422 is quite an achievement in a camera like this. And for the uninitiated, it just means that you can capture a ton of color information and data in these videos to make it really stand out from, you know, less expensive solutions and especially your smartphone. What brought me joy was creating some unique video recipes, and instead of filming in the typical F-Log, actually committing to a Rec. 709 Fujifilm recipe using one of the film simulations and trying to get the best kind of footage in the moment. When you have something like this, it just means that you can create little shots that you can share easier that look really good. When you take all of this into account, all the things that this camera can do, for first-time users, it's not just gonna live up to the hype, it's gonna exceed them. It really gives you so many creative options in the field. But what if you're not a first-time Fuji user? What if you're upgrading from a previous version? Well, your mileage may vary. There are some things that this camera can do better, but you have to know how those upgrades are actually gonna improve your work. For most people, it's not even gonna be a considerable upgrade. And in fact, there may be a good chance that this camera may frustrate longtime Fujifilm users that have held their breath waiting for this release. How could this camera have gotten better? Well, it has to start with battery life. This is something that has been an issue on the X100 series cameras as they got more feature rich. And here, it feels like it's more of an issue. I can't use this camera without babysitting the battery, without constantly turning the camera off and on in between shots. And in some instances, you will miss the shot if you keep doing that. You know, for my shooting style, even when I was just sticking to photography, it was tough for me to get more than half a day of use using this camera in the field. This is just not a great user experience. I've seen and heard several talking points from Fujifilm, how it was critical to keep the same dimensions of the camera and make sure it felt exactly the same. The reality is this camera got a few millimeters thicker to make room for that image stabilization unit. And I look at this and I'm like, well, if you're willing to bend your rule about the size and dimensions for that, I feel like you could have given it a bit more room to compensate for a new battery, or at least come up with a solution with a higher capacity battery to address this issue. If I'm being honest, and I don't think I'm the only one in this camp, I would have taken an X100 VI with better battery life that can get me through the better part of a full day than one with image stabilization and really poor battery performance. Okay, so we're changing locations. I don't know if it's because the Fujifilm police are after me for the last thing, but look, I still have a list of improvements that this camera can see. There were several instances where this camera would lag behind my shooting experience when I was shooting a ton of shots back to back or in a burst mode. You could feel that there was this bottleneck of these images being written to the card. So, you know, we're on the 6th version of this camera. To not have a UHS-2 card slot or more buffer room, or maybe a combination of both, it just feels like a missed opportunity for users. The next issue, and this shouldn't be a surprise for anyone that's been using Fujifilm cameras, is the menu system. It is atrocious. It is just pages and sub-pages of all these features being crammed into this camera, and the delineation between features, like take autofocus for example, or the subjects or zones or speeds and all, like they just sit all over. and it doesn't quite make sense. So I can only imagine a first-time user picking up this thing and just looking at this and interacting with it, where it suddenly feels like you have to go on TikTok or YouTube to find out how to use these things. That shouldn't be the norm. While it's great for creatives and influencers and YouTubers for the content, fantastic for educators, that shouldn't be the norm. Someone that's investing this much into a camera should be able to pick it up and use it confidently and be able to navigate the menus with ease. Seriously, why not use some of all that Instax money, hire a design firm, and just get really good menus on this camera that could complement the really good design of the physical camera itself? I really would love to see Fujifilm address this in a future camera. Here's the thing though, after all these years, after all these reviews, I just don't think that they will. I don't think that the company sees it as a priority. I think there might be a few individuals that bring this up, but in large part, I think they're incapable of actually changing the entire menu system on their products. I'd love to be proven wrong on this, but if you're asking me to put money on a thing, I just don't see Fujifilm addressing their menu system anytime soon. 4 years removed from the X100V, you still have to buy a filter adapter and a filter to complete the weather resistance on this camera. Now, do I think this is some sort of sneaky way to increase the margin on their products to sell more accessories? No. Do I think that this is an oversight that should have been addressed in this camera? Absolutely. I find it hard to believe that they couldn't develop a mechanism in which this ships with weather resistance right out of the box. I think that would have made for an incredible feature to talk about. Some smaller issues I had with this camera: the touchscreen is just not as responsive as your smartphone, and again, in 2024, it does feel a little dated. The tripod mount, it has shifted a little bit from the previous version, but if you're gonna be using a tripod, you're still gonna have this issue where you can't replace a battery when this camera is mounted. And the companion app, the Fujifilm app for your phone, this has seen a redesign. Here's the thing though, it didn't really work 100% of the time, even 90% of the time. I would still have issues connecting my camera and downloading photos to my mobile device. This is something that needs a redesign. And in this case, maybe it's a redesign. Now I know that's a lot, but there's still a few more things that I need to get through. Let's talk about the video features, because this has been talked about a lot and marketed a lot. When you're just trying to capture quick clips for social and little in-between moments, it's great. But when you want to do more than that, you start to see that this camera has a real ceiling when it comes to video production. All the ports that you would use to enhance the video shooting experience, they sit on the side of the camera where you would hold it. And the ports are so close together that some cable combinations of micro HDMI and USB-C just won't work. On the top of cables, instead of a standard 3.5mm jack, you have a 2.5mm jack, which just feels archaic. Here's the thing though, when it comes to video production, is that you might not even get to this point of frustration because the battery life is so poor on this camera, you're probably not going to be shooting a lot of video anyway. Now I can also touch on how the camera is named and branded and how it sounds more like a username on Reddit. But I'll be honest, I don't think Fujifilm's even ready for that conversation. And besides, I have something far more important to discuss. The biggest failure of the Fujifilm X100 has been the entire release strategy. When you factor in that not much has changed from its predecessor, the fact that there's a higher price for this camera, the fact that they moved production to China, you'd think that they'd be better positioned to address the demand of the market. No. Not even close. It's been 5 months since this camera was announced, and if you were to place a pre-order right now, you might not see a camera for another 5 months. Retailers, they're feeling this incredible pressure where customers are making multiple pre-orders at different locations and having these pre-order dollars just tied up, unable to be fulfilled. And there's some retailers that believe that they may never fulfill every order on their list. And what's the response from Fujifilm and their executives? Joy. Yeah, they can't be more happy about this situation. They are the first to let you know how this is the most pre-ordered camera in history, how demand is far exceeding their expectations. This is a really shitty situation. Here's a recent quote from the brand. What Fujifilm has been trying to do for a long time is finally coming true now. We intend to drive the entire imaging business, including Instax, while concentrating on building brand strength and not reducing the value of the properties purchased by our customers. I'll admit, this doesn't sound like the company is artificially limiting supply, but it does feel like a slap in the face to consumers, especially Fujifilm users that have supported the brand over the years. It sounds like this deliberate brand building strategy to sort of take this narrative around the X100 and reposition it into some element of prestige for the brand. And that is all happening even though the production around this camera hasn't really gotten better in an objective way. We're not talking about changing the production to a largely handmade process in premium factories. No, this smells like repositioning the narrative around the same quality product after such bad estimates. You know, if I was this bad at providing estimates to a client, there would be no cause for celebration. I know some of you might be thinking, hey, what do you know about production and supply chains? Not a lot, but you know who should? Fujifilm, the people that are making this camera. At this time, the Fujifilm X100 is a marketing masterclass in how to disappoint customers. We've witnessed a release that's considerably worse than recent gaming launch releases, and that's saying something. Anytime the company's pressed on the matter, we're met with these embarrassing PR responses that talk about their innovation and focus on meeting these high demands. I'll be honest, the only thing I want to hear from Fujifilm at this point is an apology. I think the brand should go back to its Japanese roots and just apologize. Every single time they have an opportunity to talk about this camera, this situation, apologize to the consumers, apologize to the retailers, apologize for the situation that you've created for the market. And truthfully, you keep apologizing until you rectify this situation where you have an environment where someone that really wants to get this camera isn't really waiting more than 2 or 3 weeks. Now, I know that might sound a little heavy-handed and harsh, but the reality is I was a Fujifilm user for many, many years. I don't use their products anymore for any of my personal or professional work, but the industry is better when Fujifilm is doing well. This release is an embarrassment to them and it's an embarrassment to the industry. And ultimately, I think it's on people that are talking about this brand to hold them to a higher standard, to really put their feet to the fire and call them out so things like this improve over time. Despite the drawbacks and the inventory situations, the Fujifilm X100 still shines bright. It has a compelling offering that, while not deviating too much from its predecessor, doesn't really have many competitors. There's nobody that really comes across to offer all the offerings of the Fujifilm X100 at a comparable price. While the Fujifilm X100 doesn't introduce any bold new features like internal storage, global shutter, downloadable recipes, or file encryption, the truth is it never had to. The market pressure was never there. The Fujifilm X100 just has this unique blend of design and experience that's not matched by any premium point-and-shoot solution. So if you're asking me, how does this camera stack against the market? Well, the truth is that this is probably the best all-around solution, especially when you consider the price. The only reason you would go with a Canon, Sony, Nikon, Leica, or Ricoh is if there are 1 or 2 very specific features that lean into your storytelling. Now, after all these months and all these cities and all these shoots, where have I landed with the Fujifilm X100? What is my sort of my final opinion on this camera? At this point, I feel like the X100 series has become a status symbol. It's a film camera for those who can't or won't shoot film, or it's a Leica for those who can't or won't get a Leica, or it's an accessory for those who can't or won't find internal peace. But I'm truly glad it exists because the X100 is also a statement camera that feels like a celebration of photography. You know, when you pick it up, you feel this sense of commitment to the act of photography. And again, I'm glad that it exists. If you're a seasoned photographer or you've been in the Fujifilm ecosystem for many years like I have, yeah, some of these oversights can be annoying, but it's still a great imaging tool. Who is this camera for? You mean other than people that are incredibly patient? This is a camera that's gonna really suit someone that wants to become or is very intentional with the act of photography. This is someone that, wants to be able to take a great image in the moment, leverage the tools of photography and certain unique Fujifilm differentiators like the film simulations to just hone their craft and just develop their look while practicing photography. Someone that takes it a little bit more seriously, that is dumping into the settings of their smartphone to really craft a great raw file in the moment, they're gonna find a lot to love about a camera like this. It's also a camera for people that want to have latitude with how they interact with the world. Because of that optical viewfinder, the electronic viewfinder, the hybrid viewfinder, the LCD, you have multiple ways to compose an image. And when you have those kinds of options, well, you're just gonna have more ways to tell a story. And if that's important to you, this is a camera that you should seriously consider. The predecessor was something that I dubbed as the perfect companion camera, where it's plenty for the hobbyist and a great escape for the professional. It's been a long 4 years since I made that statement, but that statement holds up pretty well for the X100 When you account for all the included features, this is an imaging tool that lets you create incredible stories in a wide array of situations in a very meaningful way. My only hope is that Fujifilm looks at this generation as an opportunity and not a complete success. That when the time comes for a true successor, we see an X100 camera that truly exceeds expectations. For those of you that have made it here to the bonus round, a couple of things. Number one, thank you so much. Number two, leave a comment with a flag from the country that you're watching from, because I love to see where you're watching from, but also, where should I visit next? Where should I go to? Where are you guys located? That's also there. Another thing I'll mention is that if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel, because it does make a difference in more people discovering the stuff that we're creating here. And the last thing I'll say is, also a bit of a disclaimer, if you're thinking about subscribing, I won't be doing any more Fujifilm videos, at least for the foreseeable future. These reviews, even the non-review videos, they take a lot of time, a lot of energy. I like to make these really polished and kind of speak to who I am as well, right? So we don't do a lot of videos, but the ones that we do, we're quite proud of. With that being said, I don't use Fujifilm products for my professional work anymore and much of my personal work. So it takes even more energy and effort outside of all the things that I'm already doing to make a Fujifilm video. So this will be the last one, at least for a while. It would take something truly unique and special for me to come back and revisit this. And yeah, if you've been here and discovered me through Fujifilm videos, thank you so much. I hope that you stick around and check out all the other stories that we have coming up. We do have more reviews in the pipeline, but we also have some travel and documentary projects that we're really excited to put together and release in the months and years to come. So I should just be honest with those of you that have made it this far of what to expect. Let me know what you think in the comments down below.